3 hours. That was all the time it took for Lord Sebastian Thorne to go from a devoted husband to a man possessed by icy rage. He didn't scream. He didn't break the furniture. He simply pointed to the heavy oak door of Blackwood Manor and whispered a command that would haunt him for the rest of his life. "Leave, and take your lies with you." He thought he was cutting out a cancer. He didn't know he was casting out his own heart, and the unborn heir he didn't know existed. 5 years later, on a dusty street in a forgotten village, Sebastian would look into a pair of eyes that perfectly mirrored his own, and realized the devastating price of his pride. But would she ever forgive the man who left her to freeze? The year was 1887, and the winter in Cornwall was particularly cruel, but it was nothing compared to the chill inside the library of Blackwood Manor. Lady Elara Thorne stood by the fireplace, her hands trembling as she clutched the hem of her velvet dressing gown. She was 20 years old, married for exactly 32 days, and currently staring at a husband she no longer recognized. Sebastian Thorne, the Earl of Blackwood, stood behind his mahogany desk. He was a man of imposing stature, known in London for his sharp business acumen and his guarded heart. Tonight, his face was a mask of stone. "I will ask you once, Elara," Sebastian said, his voice terrifyingly low. "Did you write this?" He slid a piece of parchment across the desk. It was crumpled, as if it had been clenched in a fist for hours. Elara stepped forward, her legs feeling like lead. She looked at the paper. It was a letter addressed to a man named Julian, her childhood friend and former suitor. The handwriting was an impeccable imitation of her own. "My darling Julian, patience is a virtue. The Earl is dull and easily manipulated. Once I have secured the allowance, I shall find a way to return to you. He suspects nothing." Elara gasped, the air leaving her lungs. "Sebastian, this is absurd. I haven't spoken to Julian in 2 years. This isn't my handwriting. Well, it looks like it. But the ink, the phrasing, I would never." "The stationery is yours," Sebastian cut in, his eyes dark with betrayal. "Found in your vanity by the head housekeeper. Don't insult my intelligence by denying it." "It was planted," Elara cried, tears prickling her eyes. "Lady Isabella was in my room yesterday. She asked for powder. She must have—" "Stop!" Sebastian slammed his hand on the desk. The sound cracked through the room like a pistol shot. "Isabella has been my friend since childhood. She warned me you were only after the title. I didn't want to believe her. I was a fool." Sebastian had married Elara against the wishes of his social circle. She was the daughter of an impoverished baron, bringing no dowry, only her grace and her kindness. He had thought it was a love match. Now, his deep-seated fear of being used, a trauma left over from his father's scandals, roared to the surface, blinding him to the truth. "I love you, Sebastian," Elara whispered, her voice breaking. "You love my fortune," he sneered. He walked around the desk, towering over her. He didn't strike her, but his proximity felt like a physical blow. "I will not suffer a liar under my roof. I will not be the laughing-stock of London." He walked to the door and threw it open. The draft from the hallway was freezing. "Go!" Elara blinked. "Sebastian, it is snowing. It is the middle of the night. Where am I to go?" "To Julian, I suppose," he said cruelly. "Or back to your father's ruin. I don't care. Just get out of my sight before I forget that I am a gentleman." Elara stared at him. She placed a hand instinctively over her stomach. Just that morning, she had felt the first flutter of nausea. She had planned to tell him tonight. She was carrying his child. But looking at his face, twisted with hatred and pride, she knew he wouldn't believe her. He would call the child a bastard. He would claim it was Julian's. She would not subject her baby to that accusation. Her sorrow hardened into something brittle and sharp. She raised her chin. "You are making a mistake, my lord," she said, her voice steady for the first time. "A mistake you will carry to your grave." "I'll take my chances," he spat. Elara didn't pack a bag. She didn't take the jewels he had given her. She walked out of the library, down the grand staircase, and out the heavy front doors into the biting wind. The snow swirled around her, white and blinding. As the heavy door slammed shut behind her, the sound echoing like a final judgment, Elara Thorne ceased to exist. In the freezing dark, she vowed to survive, not for him, but for the life growing inside her. 5 years later, Blackwood Manor had become a tomb. The servants moved in hushed silence, terrified of disturbing the Earl. Sebastian Thorne sat in the same library, staring at the same fireplace. He was older now, his temples graying prematurely. The lines around his mouth were etched deep with cynicism. He was wealthier than ever, his shipping empire having doubled in size, but he was a man hollowed out. He drank his brandy neat. "You are brooding again, Sebastian," a voice purred from the doorway. Lady Isabella Montague glided into the room. She was beautiful, sharp-featured, and dressed in the latest Parisian fashion. For 5 years, she had tried to claim the space Elara had left. She had succeeded in becoming his hostess, but never his wife. "I am not brooding, Isabella. I am working," Sebastian muttered, turning back to his papers. "It has been 5 years," Isabella said, resting a hand on his shoulder. "You cannot punish yourself forever for weeding out a gold digger. You did what was necessary." Sebastian flinched. Did he? For the first year he had felt righteous. By the second year, the anger had faded, replaced by a gnawing silence. By the third year, he had tried to find Elara, just to see where she had ended up. His private investigators found nothing. It was as if the earth had swallowed her whole. Her father had died shortly after the scandal, leaving no leads. "I need to inspect the wool mills in the Cotswolds," Sebastian said abruptly, standing up to dislodge Isabella's hand. "The manager reports theft. I'll handle it personally." "The Cotswolds?" Isabella wrinkled her nose. "It's a muddy backwater. Send an agent." "I need the air," Sebastian said. "I leave in the morning." 200 miles away, in the sleepy, golden stone village of Oakhaven, the morning sun was just cresting over the hills. Elara, now calling herself Mrs. Elara Stone, kneaded dough in the back of a small, warm bakery. Her hands were rougher than they used to be, and her face was thinner, but her eyes were bright. "Leo, leave the cat alone," she called out, laughing. A small boy, 4 years old, came tumbling into the kitchen. He had a mop of unruly black hair and eyes of piercing, intelligent blue. He was a whirlwind of energy. "He stole my soldier, Mama," Leo cried, holding up a wooden toy Elara had carved for him. "He is a cat, my love. He likes to hunt," Elara said, wiping flour from her cheek. She pulled the boy into a hug. He smelled of fresh rain and milk. Life had been hard. That first night in the snow, she had nearly died. A passing farmer's wagon had taken her as far as the next county. She had sold her wedding ring, the only thing she took, eventually, to rent a drafty attic. She sewed until her fingers bled, then learned to bake. She had built a life from the ashes. No one here knew she was a countess. They only knew her as the widow Stone, a hard worker with a bright son. "Are we going to the market today?" Leo asked. "We are," Elara said, fixing his collar. "And you must stay close. The wool merchants are coming through town, and the streets will be busy with carriages." She felt a pang of anxiety, as she always did when strangers came to town. She adjusted her bonnet, pulling it low over her face. She was safe here. Sebastian was a ghost from a past life, a nightmare that had finally ended. Or so she thought. The wheel of Sebastian's carriage shattered just outside of Oakhaven. "Damnation!" Sebastian swore, stepping out into the mud. "Apologies, my lord," the driver stammered. "The rut was deep. It will take hours to fix. The village is just a quarter-mile walk." Sebastian sighed, adjusting his greatcoat. "Fine. I shall wait at the local inn. Get this fixed." He walked into Oakhaven with the air of a man who owned the world, but didn't want it. The village was quaint, bustling with market day energy. Farmers haggled over sheep. Women carried baskets of apples. It was noisy and alive, a stark contrast to the silence of Blackwood Manor. Sebastian found the inn, ordered a room and a meal, and sat by the window, watching the common folk with detached disinterest. He was halfway through his ale when he saw him. A child was running through the square, chasing a rolling hoop. The boy was laughing, his head thrown back. Sebastian's glass stopped halfway to his mouth. It wasn't just that the boy was handsome, it was the angle of his jaw, the way his black hair fell over his forehead. It was like looking into a mirror that showed Sebastian 30 years ago. The boy tripped, skinning his knee. He didn't cry. He sat up, brushed off the dirt and scowled, a scowl that Sebastian had seen on his own face in portraits 1,000 times. "Leo!" a woman's voice called out. Sebastian froze. That voice. He watched as a woman in a simple grey dress rushed out of the bakery across the square. She wore a bonnet that hid her profile, but the way she moved, graceful, fluid, despite the plain clothes, struck Sebastian like a physical blow to the chest. She knelt beside the boy. "Let me see." The boy looked up at her. "I'm fine, Mama. It's just a scratch." The woman turned her head slightly to check the street for traffic. The sunlight hit her face. It was Elara. She looked different. Tired. Wiser. But unmistakably her. The glass slipped from Sebastian's fingers and shattered on the floor. The inn went quiet. Sebastian didn't notice. His heart was hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. She is here. She is alive. And then the math hit him. The boy, 4 years old, maybe nearly 5. He had kicked her out 5 years ago. The room spun. The lover's letter had mentioned returning to Julian. But this child was not Julian's. Julian had red hair and a weak chin. This child was a thorn. Every line of his body screamed it. Rage, confusion, and a sudden, terrifying hope warred within him. He stood up, knocking his chair over. "My lord?" the innkeeper asked nervously. Sebastian ignored him. He stormed out of the inn, his boots loud on the cobblestones. Across the square, Elara was dusting off Leo's trousers. "Up you go, my brave knight," she said softly. "Mama, look at that man," Leo whispered, pointing. Elara froze. She followed Leo's finger. Standing 10 yards away, dressed in fine black wool, looking like the Grim Reaper himself, was Sebastian. Their eyes locked. For a second, the noise of the market vanished. Elara's face drained of all color. She grabbed Leo's hand, her grip so tight the boy flinched. "Sebastian," she breathed. He closed the distance in 3 long strides. He didn't look at her. He looked at the boy. He looked at the air he had thrown away. "Who is he?" Sebastian demanded, his voice shaking with suppressed emotion. Elara stepped in front of Leo, shielding him with her body. The submissive girl he had kicked out was gone. In her place was a lioness. "He is my son," Elara said, her voice cold steel. "And he is nothing to you. Don't lie to me," Sebastian roared, causing people in the market to stop and stare. "Look at him, Elara. He has my face." "He has the face of a man who abandoned us," Elara hissed, keeping her voice low to protect Leo. "You cast us out. You forfeited your right to know his name." "I didn't know," Sebastian shouted. "You didn't tell me. Would you have believed me?" Elara challenged him, her eyes wet but fierce. "That night would you have believed me, or would you have called him a bastard?" Sebastian opened his mouth, but no words came. The truth hung heavy between them. He wouldn't have believed her. He looked down at Leo. The boy was peeking out from behind his mother's skirts, looking at Sebastian with wide, curious, intelligent eyes. "I am the Earl of Blackwood," Sebastian said, his voice breaking. "And that boy is my heir." "You have no heir," Elara said, backing away toward the bakery door. "You have only your pride, my lord. I suggest you go back to it." She turned and shoved Leo into the shop, slamming the door and locking it. Sebastian stood alone in the square, the center of attention, his chest heaving. He had found her. He had a son, and he had never felt more powerless in his entire life. Sebastian Thorne did not leave Oakhaven. Instead, he declared war on the quiet life Elara had built. He rented every room at the Boar's Head Inn, turning the rustic establishment into his temporary command center. Within 24 hours, he had summoned his personal solicitor, Mr. Percival Hayes, from London. The village of Oakhaven was in a frenzy. The Earl of Blackwood walked their muddy streets, his boots polished to a shine, his eyes fixed permanently on the small bakery with the peeling blue paint. Inside the bakery, Elara was suffocating. She kept the blinds drawn. She forbade Leo from playing outside. "Why can't I go out, Mama?" Leo asked, kicking his legs against the chair. "The tall man promised to show me his horses." Elara dropped the mixing bowl. It clattered loudly against the table. "You spoke to him?" "Through the window," Leo said innocently. "He said he has a horse named Titan. He said Titan is big enough to carry a knight." Elara's blood ran cold. Sebastian was seducing her son with the one thing she couldn't give him, a legacy. That afternoon, the bell above the shop door chimed. It wasn't a customer. It was Mr. Hayes, the solicitor, looking uncomfortable in his silk suit. "Mrs. Stone," Hayes said, glancing around the modest shop. "Lord Blackwood wishes to present you with a formal offer." "I don't want his money," Elara said, wiping her hands on her apron. "It is not just money, madam. It is an arrangement," Hayes said, pulling a document from his briefcase. "The Earl acknowledges the boy, Leopold, as his biological issue. He is prepared to set up a trust fund of £50,000. He will cover the best education at Eton, then Oxford. The boy will be raised at Blackwood Manor." "And me?" Elara asked, her voice trembling. "What happens to the mother?" Hayes cleared his throat. "You would be provided with a generous cottage on the estate grounds. You would have visitation rights, of course, but the boy must be raised in the main house. To prepare him for his title." Elara laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. "So I am to be the nanny, while he plays father to a son he threw out into the snow? Get out!" "Madam, please consider—" "I said get out!" Elara screamed, grabbing a rolling pin. Hayes fled, but Elara knew this was only the first volley. That evening, a storm rolled in. The rain lashed against the windows. Elara was locking up when a heavy knock shook the door. She knew who it was. She opened it. Sebastian stood there, drenched, his hair plastered to his forehead. He looked less like an earl and more like a desperate man. "Hayes told me you threatened to beat him," Sebastian said, stepping inside before she could stop him. "He tried to buy my son," Elara snapped. "You think you can just write a check and erase 5 years? You missed his first steps, Sebastian. You missed his first word. You missed the fever that almost took him last winter when I sat up for 3 nights praying because I couldn't afford a doctor." Sebastian flinched as if slapped. "I didn't know," he whispered hoarsely. "Elara, I didn't know." Because you didn't ask, she cried, tears finally spilling over. You looked at a forged letter and decided I was a whore. You didn't look at me. Sebastian reached out, his hand hovering near her face. I was jealous. I was mad with it. The thought of you with Julian. It broke my mind, Elara. And then, when you left, the house became a graveyard. I have been dead for 5 years. And I have been alive, Elara said, stepping back. I built this. I am happy here. You cannot come in here and wreck it. He is my son too, Sebastian insisted, his voice dropping to a plea. I saw him today, Elara. He has my temper. He has your eyes. Do not deny him his birthright because you hate me. Hate me all you want, but let me give him the world. You don't understand, Elara said softly. The world you live in is full of vipers. Isabella, the gossip, the judgment. Here he is just Leo. There he will be the bastard Earl. I won't let them tear him apart. At the mention of Isabella, Sebastian's expression hardened. Isabella is nothing. She manages the household, nothing more. I will protect him, I swear it on my life. Your life isn't enough, Elara said. Please, Sebastian, just go. He looked at her for a long moment, the tension in the room thick enough to choke on. Finally, he nodded slowly. I will not take him by force, Elara. I am not a monster, despite what you think. But I am not leaving Oakhaven. I will wait, until you realize that a bakery is no place for a future Earl. He turned and walked back into the rain. Elara locked the door, slid to the floor, and buried her face in her hands. She knew he wouldn't give up, but she also knew something he didn't. The Viper was already on her way. News travelled fast in the 19th century, especially when paid for. Lady Isabella Montague had her spies, and the telegram reached her in London within hours of Sebastian's discovery. Earl found the girl. There is a child. Boy. Resembles his lordship. Situation critical. Isabella crumbled the paper in her gloved hand. She stood in the drawing room of Blackwood Manor, the room she had redecorated 3 times, waiting for the proposal that never came. If Sebastian brought Elara back, Isabella's reign was over. If he brought back a son, her hopes of marrying him and securing the estate for her own indebted family were incinerated. Prepare the carriage, she ordered her maid. We are going to the country. Isabella arrived in Oakhaven 3 days later. She did not come with the thunder of Sebastian's arrival. She came like a snake in the grass. She waited until Sebastian had ridden out to the nearby hills. He had taken to riding every morning to clear his head. Isabella ordered her driver to stop in front of the bakery. She entered the shop in a cloud of expensive French perfume. The scent made Elara freeze. It was the same scent that had lingered in the hallways of Blackwood Manor. Elara, darling, Isabella cooed. You've aged. The flour really does clog the pores, doesn't it? Elara wiped her hands on a rag, her heart hammering. What do you want, Isabella? I want to save you from embarrassment, Isabella said, inspecting a loaf of bread with disdain. Sebastian is in a sentimental mood. He sees a bastard child and thinks he can play happy families. But you and I know the truth. Isabella leaned in, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. We know the child isn't his. Leo is his son, Elara shouted. Is he? Isabella smiled. Or is he Julian's? Or perhaps some stable boy's? It doesn't matter what is true, Elara. It matters what London believes. And if you dare step foot back in Blackwood Manor, I will ensure every newspaper in England prints that you are a harlot who tricked the Earl with another man's spawn. I will ruin the boy's life before it has even begun. He will be a pariah. Elara gripped the counter. This was her nightmare. She could handle poverty. She couldn't handle her son being destroyed by the cruelty of the aristocracy. "What do you want?" Elara asked, defeated. "Take the money Sebastian offered. And leave," Isabella hissed. "Go to America. Go anywhere. Just disappear. If you do, I will ensure Sebastian forgets you. If you stay, I will burn this little life of yours to the ground." At that moment, the back door swung open. Leo ran in, holding a wooden sword. "Mama, I defeated the dragon." He stopped when he saw the tall, cold woman. Isabella looked down at the boy. Her confident smile faltered. The resemblance was undeniable. It wasn't just a likeness. It was a carbon copy. For a second, fear flickered in Isabella's eyes. This boy was a threat that no rumor could kill. If Sebastian spent enough time with him, he would never let him go. "Cute," Isabella said, her voice tight. "Think about it, Elara. You have until tonight." She swept out of the shop. Elara rushed to lock the door. She was shaking. She had to leave. Isabella was right. She couldn't fight them. She had to take Leo and run, just like she did 5 years ago. She began to pack frantically. "Mama, why are we crying?" Leo asked, scared. "We're going on an adventure, Leo," Elara sobbed. "Get your coat." But as night fell, a strange, heavy drowsiness overtook Elara. She sat down on the bed to rest for just a moment. Outside, in the alleyway behind the bakery, a figure in a dark cloak, one of Isabella's hired footmen, stacked crates of dry straw against the wooden walls. He struck a match. Isabella wasn't taking chances with exile. She wanted erasure. Sebastian was dining at the Boar's Head when he smelled it. It was a distinct, acrid scent drifting through the open window. Wood smoke. But not the cozy smell of a hearth. This was the chaotic, choking smell of destruction. "Fire!" someone screamed in the street. Sebastian ran to the window. Across the square, the bakery was glowing with a demonic orange light. Flames were licking up the side of the building, consuming the dry timber of the roof. "Elara!" Sebastian roared. He didn't think. He vaulted over the windowsill, landing in the mud, and sprinted across the square. The villagers were forming a bucket line, but the fire was moving too fast. "They're inside!" Mrs. Higgins, the grocer, screamed. "I haven't seen them come out!" Sebastian kicked the front door. It was locked. He backed up and threw his shoulder against it with the force of a battering ram. The wood splintered. He kicked again, and the door gave way. Smoke billowed out, thick and black. Sebastian dropped to his knees, coughing, covering his mouth with his sleeve. "Elara! Leo!" The heat was intense. The flames were eating the counter, where Elara kneaded dough. He crawled toward the stairs at the back. He found them on the landing. Elara was slumped against the wall, unconscious. The smoke had gotten to her first. Leo was curled in her lap, crying softly, his face buried in her dress. "Papa!" Leo coughed. It was the first time he had used the word. It broke Sebastian's heart and surged adrenaline through his veins. "I've got you," Sebastian choked out. He scooped Leo up with one arm and grabbed Elara by the waist, hauling her up. She was dead weight. The roof above them groaned. "Hold on to my neck, Leo. Tight." Sebastian dragged Elara down the stairs. A beam crashed down behind them, sending a shower of sparks onto his back. He roared in pain as the fire singed his coat and burned his skin. But he didn't stop. He stumbled through the inferno of the shop, blindly kicking obstacles out of his way. They burst out onto the cobblestones, just as the bakery windows blew out, glass shattering across the square. Sebastian collapsed in the street, gasping for air, shielding Elara and Leo with his body. "Get the doctor!" he screamed at the crowd. He turned Elara over. Her face was soot-stained, her breathing shallow. "Elara, wake up! Please God, wake up!" Leo was coughing but safe. He crawled over to his mother. "Mama!" Elara's eyelids fluttered. She took a jagged breath and coughed. "Leo, he's safe," Sebastian promised, smoothing the hair back from her face. His hands were shaking. "He's safe. I have him." Elara looked at him, her eyes unfocused. "Isabella," she whispered. "She was here. She said—" Sebastian froze. "Isabella was here?" "She came today," Elara wheezed. "She threatened to take him." A cold fury, colder than the winter 5 years ago, settled over Sebastian. He looked up. Standing at the edge of the crowd, watching the fire with a look of terrifying satisfaction, was Lady Isabella Montague. She hadn't expected Sebastian to run into the fire. She looked shocked to see them alive. Sebastian gently handed Leo to the innkeeper's wife. "Watch him." He stood up. His coat was burned, his hands were bleeding, and his face was blackened with soot. He looked like a demon rising from hell. He walked toward Isabella. The crowd parted, sensing the violence radiating from him. "Sebastian," Isabella stammered as he approached, her eyes widening. "Thank heavens you are—" "Did you do this?" Sebastian asked. His voice was quiet, but it carried across the silent square. "I? Don't be absurd. I only arrived to—" "My wife tells me you visited her," Sebastian said, stepping closer. "She tells me you threatened her." "She's lying. She is delirious from the smoke," Isabella cried, stepping back. "My lord," a voice called out. It was the local constable. He was dragging a man by the collar, the footman Isabella had brought with her. "We caught this man running from the alley. He smells of kerosene." The footman, terrified of the hulking, furious Earl, pointed a shaking finger at Isabella. "She paid me. She told me to scare them out. She said £50 if I lit the straw." The silence in the square was deafening. Sebastian stopped inches from Isabella. He looked down at her, seeing her for the first time without the veil of friendship. He saw the rot inside her. "You tried to kill my son," Sebastian said. "He is a bastard," Isabella shrieked, losing her composure. "She tricked you. I did it for you, Sebastian, to save the family name." "The only stain on my family name," Sebastian said, his voice ringing out like a judge's gavel, "is that I allowed you into my home." He turned to the constable. "Arrest her, attempted murder, arson, and tell the magistrate that the Earl of Blackwood will personally oversee the prosecution." Isabella screamed as she was dragged away, her fine silk dress dragging in the mud. Sebastian didn't watch her go. He turned back to the woman and child sitting on the cobblestones. He fell to his knees beside them. The adrenaline faded, and the pain in his burned back flared up, but he didn't care. He pulled Elara and Leo into his arms, burying his face in Elara's shoulder. "I am so sorry," he sobbed, finally breaking. "I am so sorry." For the first time in 5 years, Elara didn't push him away. She rested her head against his soot-stained chest and wept. The weeks following the fire were a blur of white linen and the smell of medicinal salve. Blackwood Manor, once a fortress of silence and cold stone, had been transformed into a convalescent home. Sebastian had ordered Elara and Leo moved to the east wing, the sunniest part of the estate, insisting that the physician, Dr. Heir, visit twice daily. Elara spent her days in a haze of recovery. The smoke had roughened her voice, leaving it a husky whisper, and her hands were bandaged where the heat had blistered her skin. But her physical pain was nothing compared to the disorientation of being back. She lay in a 4-poster bed that was worth more than the entire bakery she had lost. The silk sheets felt alien against her skin, which had grown accustomed to rough wool and cotton. Every time she woke, he was there. Sebastian. He didn't hover, and he didn't intrude. He simply sat in a high-backed armchair near the window, reading documents or watching Leo play on the rug. His own arm was in a sling, and his movements were stiff, betraying the severity of the burns across his back, injuries he had sustained, shielding her from the collapsing beam. One rainy afternoon, 3 weeks after the fire, Elara watched him through half-closed eyes. He was struggling to pour tea with his left hand, his dominant arm bound to his chest. He spilled a drop, hissed in frustration, and wiped it away with a linen napkin. "You should let the maids do that," Elara rasped. Sebastian froze. He turned to her, his eyes dark with fatigue, but instantly softening when they met hers. "I prefer to do it myself," he said, abandoning the tea to walk to her bedside. "I don't like strangers in this room while you are sleeping. I feel the need to stand guard." "Isabella is in prison, Sebastian," Elara said, pulling herself up against the pillows. "There are no more monsters." "I am not guarding you from Isabella," Sebastian admitted, his voice low. He sat on the edge of the chair, careful not to touch the bed. "I am guarding you from my own mistakes. I keep thinking I will wake up and find the room empty again, that the last 5 years will restart." Elara looked at him. The arrogance that had defined the young Earl she married was gone. In its place was a terrified vigilance. "I am not leaving," she said quietly. "I told you. Leo needs a home." "And you?" Sebastian asked, the question hanging heavy in the air. "What do you need, Elara?" Elara looked out the window at the rain lashing against the glass. "I need time. I need to know that this," she gestured to the luxury around them, "isn't a trap. I need to know that the man who carried me out of the fire is the man who will stay, not the man who cast me out into the snow." Sebastian nodded slowly. "Take all the time you need. I will wait. If it takes 10 years, I will wait." The courting of a wife. As Elara's strength returned, a strange routine developed at Blackwood Manor. They were married, yet they lived like wary strangers, circling each other with polite caution. Sebastian moved into the dressing room, adjoining the master suite, leaving the main bedroom to Elara. He refused to presume intimacy. Instead, he began a campaign of courtship, so subtle and relentless it caught Elara off guard. It started with the bread. Elara missed baking. It was her therapy, her way of thinking. But the manor kitchen was the domain of Mrs. Halloway, the formidable cook, and an earl's wife did not need dough. Or so she thought. One morning, Elara came down to breakfast to find a small, wrapped parcel on her plate. She opened it to find a pouch of rare saffron and a note written in Sebastian's sprawling, elegant script. "I recall you once mentioned a recipe for saffron buns you wanted to try, but the spice was too expensive. The kitchen is yours if you wish it. Mrs. Halloway has been informed that the Countess is the supreme authority on all things flour and yeast." Elara looked up to see Sebastian at the other end of the table, hidden behind the Times. "You told the cook I was taking over?" Elara asked, a smile tugging at her lips. Sebastian lowered the paper. "I told the cook that my wife is an artist, and artists need their studios." That afternoon, the servants were shocked to see the Countess, sleeves rolled up, covered in flour, teaching the scullery maids how to braid dough. When Sebastian walked past the kitchen door and saw her laughing, a smudge of flour on her nose, he stopped. He leaned against the doorframe for a full 5 minutes, just watching her, looking like a starving man finally seeing a feast. But it wasn't just the gifts, it was the fatherhood. Leo was a ball of energy, loud and chaotic, completely unsuited for the stiff atmosphere of an ancestral home. Sebastian didn't dampen his spirit. He adapted the house to it. One afternoon, Elara was reading in the garden when she heard shouting. She ran around the hedge, fearing the worst. She stopped dead. Sebastian was on his hands and knees in the grass, ruining a pair of bespoke trousers. Leo was on his back, shrieking with laughter. "Surrender, Sir Knight!" Leo yelled, brandishing a stick. "Never!" Sebastian roared playfully, collapsing dramatically as Leo poked him with the sword. "Alas, I am slain by the great Leopold." Sebastian lay in the grass, eyes closed, tongue lolling out. Leo climbed onto his chest, cheering. Elara watched, her heart squeezing painfully. This was the man she had dreamed of when she first married him. Not the cold Earl, but this man, who didn't care about grass stains or dignity, only about the giggle of a small boy with blue eyes. Sebastian opened one eye and saw her. He didn't scramble up in embarrassment. He smiled, a genuine, boyish smile that took 10 years off his face. "He is a formidable warrior, my lady," Sebastian called out from the ground. "I fear the estate is conquered." "I fear it is," Elara whispered to herself. The shadow of doubt, despite the laughter, shadows remained. 2 months into their stay, the weather turned. A freak cold snap hit Cornwall, dropping temperatures below freezing. The wind howled around the eaves of the manor, mimicking the sound of that terrible night 5 years ago. Elara couldn't sleep. The cold seeped into her bones. She paced her room, the memories assaulting her. The slamming door, the biting wind, the fear that her baby would die before he was born. She needed water. She wrapped her robe tight around herself and stepped out into the hallway. She saw a light under the door of Sebastian's study. She pushed the door open quietly. Sebastian wasn't working. He was sitting in front of the dying fire, staring into the embers. In his hand, he held a piece of paper. He looked up as she entered, and he tried to hide the paper, but he wasn't fast enough. Elara recognized it. It was the forged letter, the one Isabella had planted. "Why do you still have that?" Elara asked, her voice trembling. "Burn it." "I can't," Sebastian said, his voice ragged. He looked exhausted, shadows circling his eyes. "Why?" Elara stepped closer. "It's a lie. It ruined our lives." "That is why I keep it," Sebastian said. He looked at the crumpled parchment with loathing. "I keep it to remind myself how easy it was. How easy it was for me to doubt you. How quickly I let my pride destroy the best thing that ever happened to me." He looked up at her, and Elara saw tears in his eyes. "I look at this letter, Elara, and I don't see Isabella's handwriting anymore. I see my own weakness. I need to remember it. Because if I ever forget how cold I was, I don't deserve to be warm again." Elara felt a crack in the wall she had built around her heart. She realized then that she wasn't the only one traumatized by that night. Sebastian was haunted by his own actions, torturing himself with the evidence of his failure. She walked over to him and gently took the paper from his hand. "You are punishing the man you were 5 years ago," Elara said softly. "But that man didn't run into a burning building for us. That man didn't play knights in the grass." She tossed the paper into the fire. They watched as the edges curled, the ink turning to ash, the lies finally consumed by the heat. "Let him go, Sebastian," she whispered. "I have." Sebastian stood up. He reached out, his fingers grazing her cheek. "I don't know how to forgive myself, Elara. Every time I look at Leo, I see the years I missed. I see the hunger you must have felt. It kills me." "Then stop looking at the past," Elara said, placing her hand over his heart. "Look at the future. We have a lot of years left, Sebastian. Don't waste them looking back." He closed his eyes and leaned his forehead against hers. For the first time, they stood together, not as Earl and Countess, but as two broken people holding each other up. The solarium. 3 months passed. Spring arrived, bursting forth with a violence of colour that made the grey stone of the manor seem to glow. "I have something to show you," Sebastian announced one morning at breakfast. He seemed nervous, fidgeting with his cuffs, a habit he had developed only around her. "Is it another pony?" Elara teased. "Leo already has 2. No, this is for you." He led her through the house, past the library, which he now rarely used, to the south side of the manor. This wing had been shut up for years, used for storage. Sebastian stopped before a set of double doors. "I wanted to give you something that was yours. Not something I bought, but something created." He threw the doors open. Elara gasped. He had gutted the old conservatory. The walls had been replaced with floor-to-ceiling glass, flooding the room with sunlight. The floor was paved with warm terracotta tiles, but it was the contents that made her cover her mouth in shock. On one side, there were marble countertops, pristine and wide, perfect for rolling dough. There was a state-of-the-art brick oven, custom-built into the wall, identical to the one she had in Oakhaven, but cleaner, better. On the other side was a comfortable sitting area with velvet armchairs, easels for painting, and a writing desk. And everywhere there were plants, lemon trees, herbs, jasmine, filling the air with a scent that was fresh and alive. "You said you didn't want to just be a countess," Sebastian said, watching her face anxiously. "You said you liked the work. I didn't want you to feel like you had to hide that part of yourself here. You can bake here. You can read. You can lock the door and keep everyone out, including me." He had painted the walls a soft, buttery yellow, the exact shade of the bakery walls in Oakhaven. Elara walked into the room. She ran her hand over the cool marble. She touched the handle of the oven door. He hadn't tried to turn her into a lady of leisure. He had brought her sanctuary into his castle. He had validated her survival. "You built me a bakery," she whispered, tears pricking her eyes. "I built you a haven," Sebastian corrected gently. "Do you like it?" Elara turned to him. She didn't speak. She simply crossed the room and threw her arms around his neck. It was the first time she had initiated physical contact in 9 years. Sebastian froze for a split second. Then his arms wrapped around her waist, holding her tight, burying his face in her neck. He smelled of sandalwood and rain. She smelled of vanilla and hope. "I love it," she sobbed into his coat. "I love it." The question in the roses. The final barrier fell a week later. It was a Sunday. The bells of the village church were ringing in the distance. The air was sweet with the scent of the rose garden, which was now in full bloom, thousands of white and red petals unfurling in the sun. Elara sat on a stone bench, watching Leo chase a butterfly. He was fast, his legs pumping, his laughter echoing off the manor walls. She heard the crunch of boots on gravel. Sebastian approached. He was dressed informally, in a white shirt and breeches, looking younger and more relaxed than she had ever seen him. He sat next to her on the bench, leaving a respectful distance between them, though that distance had been shrinking every day. "He looks happy," Sebastian said, nodding toward Leo. "He is," Elara agreed. "He told me yesterday that he wants to stay here forever. He asked if we have to go away again." Sebastian tensed. "And what did you tell him?" Elara turned to look at her husband. "I told him that we are home." Sebastian let out a breath, his shoulders sagging with relief. He looked down at his hands, clasping and unclasping them. "Elara," he started, his voice serious, "I have honored your request." I have waited. I have tried to show you, in every way I know how, that I am not the man I was." "You have," Elara said softly. "But I find that I am a selfish man," Sebastian continued, turning to face her fully. "I find that living in the same house with you, dining across the table from you, hearing you laugh in the other room, it is not enough. It is torture." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. It was worn at the edges, as if he had been carrying it around for weeks, working up the courage. "I do not want to be your roommate, Elara. I do not want to be your co-parent. I want to be your husband, in every sense of the word." He slid off the bench, dropping to one knee on the gravel path. Elara's heart hammered against her ribs. "You already have a ring," Sebastian said, opening the box. "The Blackwood diamond. It is heavy, cold, and burdened with history. It belongs to the Countess." Inside the box sat a different ring. It was a simple band of gold, inset with a piece of polished lapis lazuli, a deep celestial blue with flecks of gold. "This ring," Sebastian said, his voice thick with emotion, "matches your eyes, and it matches Leo's. It is not for the Countess. It is for Elara, the woman who survived the snow, the woman who raised a king on a baker's wage, the woman I love with a ferocity that terrifies me." He looked up at her, his soul laid bare in his eyes. "I broke my first vow to you, Elara. I promised to cherish you, and I cast you out. I cannot undo that. But I am asking you to let me make a second vow. A vow to serve you, to honor the woman you have become, to spend the rest of my days making sure you never feel cold again." Elara looked at the ring. Blue, the color of truth. She thought of the last few months, the saffron, the nights in the grass, the yellow solarium, the burned hand reaching for her in the fire. She realized she wasn't afraid anymore. The anger that had fueled her for 5 years had finally run out, replaced by something warmer, stronger. She reached out her left hand. "Ask me, Sebastian," she whispered. Sebastian took her hand. His fingers were trembling. "Elara Thorne, will you marry me? Again? Will you let me come home to you?" "Yes," she said, a smile breaking across her face like dawn. "Yes, Sebastian." He slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. He didn't stand up immediately. He pressed his forehead against her hand, closing his eyes. "Thank you," he choked out. "Thank you." Elara leaned down, cupped his face, and pulled him up. When he stood, she didn't pull away. She rose to meet him. He kissed her. It wasn't the polite peck of their wedding day years ago. It was a kiss of desperation, of relief, of a love that had been tested by fire and ice and had survived. It tasted of salt and second chances. "You! Papa! Mama!" They broke apart, breathless, to find Leo standing a few feet away, covering his eyes with his hands, peering through his fingers. "You are being mushy," Leo accused, giggling. Sebastian laughed, a deep, resonant sound that startled the birds from the hedges. He scooped Elara up into his arms, spinning her around as she shrieked with laughter, her dress flaring out like a bluebell. "I am being mushy," Sebastian declared, setting her down, but keeping his arm tight around her waist. "And I intend to be mushy for the rest of my life. Get used to it, Sir Knight." He held out his other arm to Leo. "Come here." Leo ran into them, creating a tangled hug of 3. Standing there in the rose garden, surrounded by the scent of blooming flowers, the ghosts of the past finally faded away. The snow was gone. The fire was out. And as Sebastian looked over his son's head at his wife, seeing the blue ring on her finger, he knew that this was the only title that had ever mattered. He was forgiven. He was loved. He was home. And that, my friends, is the story of the Earl who lost everything to find what truly mattered. It took a fire to melt the ice around Sebastian's heart. But in the end, love rose from the ashes. It's a reminder that pride can cost us our happiness, but forgiveness, that is the bravest act of all. What did you think of Elara's choice? Could you have forgiven Sebastian after 5 years? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of heartbreak and redemption, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss our next dramatic historical saga. Until next time.